Welcome everyone to this special legal compliance webinar around the HR legal issues and some of the HR challenges that agencies are facing as a result of the coronavirus. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director here at Kaizen Synergy Law Firm, and many of you know we operate and run and support your Gemba 360 legal compliance system. Today's session is a fairly short but succinct session around some of the HR and legal issues that many agencies are actually asking us about. Normally we run these sessions weekly around specific key topics. This session has been specially run. It is being recorded and will be circulated out to all attendees and for use in your own agency, like all our other webinars. We thought it was just particularly important given the current circumstance. Many agencies are obviously looking at people working from home. There's been discussions from the Commonwealth or directions from the Commonwealth to expect somewhere of around the 20 to 30% of workforce being affected. And as a result of this, many questions are being left unanswered, so to speak, and staff, from what we can see and hear across different agencies, coming in and saying, look, we want to work from home, what do we do? And HR managers are left to kind of field some of these questions. So today's session is really to cover off some of the mostly common questions that we're getting asked, and some of the questions that I know CEOs and HR managers are bouncing around, and really give you some clarity around that. As always, these sessions are being recorded. We will open up the phone lines and computer lines at the end of the session, and more than happy to stay on the line, answer any questions that any of you have today. All these materials will obviously be circulated around, as I said, as well too, and we'll do that after the webinar this morning. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar, we do pay our respects accordingly to the traditional owners from around the country. So let's just briefly have a look at when we talk of HR personnel, obviously the focus is mostly on staff, but questions have also been raised, similar questions have also been raised around contractors and volunteers. And equally, I'll cover some of those as well. Just in terms of the legal framework around where this is coming from, and I'll move through these slides fairly quickly because we have covered these in other sessions. But again, because we do have some people joining us that may not have attended those other sessions or seen those, I am just going to cover these off very briefly to put things into context for you. So with this, the legal framework usually focuses on, when we talk of HR and employees, it really focuses on fair work obligations as well as work health and safety. But in this circumstance, under the COVID-19 pandemic, we do need to consider, obviously, biosecurity legislation, which will actually provide direction and override some of the obligations that we can see under fair work and also work health and safety. There are, in saying that, obligations that HR managers, CEOs, and also key personnel need to make sure that if people are changing employment relationships with your agency, that then there are still duties on directors and officers to ensure that your agency is effectively carrying out its due diligence, skills and checks around these contracts and negotiations as well. So effectively, there are a number of biosecurity legislation. In summary, most of these are directives. What I mean by that is you can see what we've seen with the Commonwealth government standing up saying, look, they're expecting staff to suggest to self-isolate, to quarantine, to work from home. There's those types of directions that can be provided, and the reason that they can be provided is really under these particular pieces of legislation. As I said, I'm not going to go into them because this is not a session about pandemic legislation. It's a session about some of the key topics around HR. So really, once you do get, or once we see these, which we have over the past few weeks, directions through media around suggesting that people be directed to self-quarantine if they are, or they've come into, if they are infected with the coronavirus, or they've come into close contact with the coronavirus, then they're being directed to self-quarantine, self-isolate, and quarantine themselves as well. It also then opens up the door to then people asking to work from home, and raises a number of other issues which we are seeing. And effectively, these powers at the Commonwealth level are then reflected at the state level here. And by all means, you can have a look at these on the slides after the session if you'd like to. A lot of what I'm talking about is then reflected across some of the key documents in terms of Australia's Health Sector Emergency Response Plan, the Communicable Diseases Network guidelines, and also each of your state and territory COVID-19 pandemic plans. So let's have a look at one of the responses that I'm going to start with is to say that when we look at HR areas, it's not just a ramp up to everybody work from home immediately. There really needs to be a proportionate response taken by your agency. And this is reflective in all of the pandemic plans that are provided, whether it be the Commonwealth or the state or territory government pandemic plans. So that said, part of that is to look at some of your staff that may, if they do have the corona, or they've been tested for the coronavirus, or they've completed the self-assessment form, or if they've come into close contact. Part of this is to build up your own agency's capacity to allow certain people to work from home, and also what the process is for that to happen as well. So much of this is around actually taking a proportionate response around this, and I will keep on coming back to this. So part of that is the first questions that people actually ask us is, well, if an employee wants to stay at home as a precaution against being exposed to the coronavirus, what do you actually do? Well, what we have recommended around this, and we have looked at the Fair Work obligations as well too, as what the regulator says. We've also looked at what work health and safety say as well. And the consistent approach has been that if an employee wants to stay at home as a precaution against being exposed to the coronavirus, they will need to make a request to work from home from yourselves and either take some sort of paid or unpaid leave, such as annual leave or long service leave. So with it, these requests are generally subject to normal leave application processes in the workplace, or if an employee is sick or has a family member, for example, a child who is sick, then usual leave work applies. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they are automatically now entitled for a work from home, or what we're calling here work from home or stay at home arrangement with yourselves. We need to actually separate these two things out quite carefully, or three things out quite carefully. So the first one is, if an employee wants to stay at home as a precaution, then they can make a request for you to do that. And it's really up to yourselves on what is the actual risk that that person has. Has your agency taken the relevant steps around this? Is there anybody else that's come into close contact that they want to work from home around this? And if they do it, then again, under Fair Work, then they can either, if it's granted, then they can take some sort of paid or unpaid leave, as I mentioned, and again, you've got your entitlements there. Now, as I said, separately really around that is if they have a person who's sick as well, and we've had situations where It's not just their immediate family. All of a sudden, we've heard through a number of different agencies where it's a second degree person that they're taking care of as well too, or that person needs some sort of other elective surgery, which has now been cancelled in many states. But effectively, again, normal sick leave or leave or carer's leave would apply in this circumstance. And given the situation, it is something that your agency needs to evaluate as well. What we are asking people to suggest to do is to discuss their level of risk of contracting the coronavirus, obviously with their line manager, their HR manager, their GP, and also if you do have them, so obviously the work health and safety rep or union representative as well. That is placed in no specific 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 order. It's just a list of people that they may want to consider to actually speak about. At this stage, we have said that the final decision of whether an employee may work from home should be really reflected either in your deed of delegation, but it is an agency decision, especially around this. What we do have for agencies as well too is a standard work from home agreement as well, and I'll come back to this as well. It is a standard form agreement that your agency can use, and it has all the details and liability provisions as well too, and assessment checks that literally can be used by your agency as well. And I'll come back to that as well, but that will assist you in doing that. The next question is, what happens if an employee or their family member is sick with the coronavirus? What do you do then? Well, this one I'm going to say is quite simply a little bit more direct. Full-time and part-time employees who can't come to work because they are sick, because they've either been had the symptoms of the coronavirus and they're in the process of being tested. And if an employee needs to look after a family member who is sick with the coronavirus or is equally suffering as an expected case, then under the pandemic legislation, they are required to be tested. They are required to self-isolate for a period of 2 weeks as well too. Now, with it, what we have instructed agencies across the board is to actually utilize the self-assessment tool, which a number of you have, actually all of you I think, have actually started to use, or it is available on your dashboard. And this effectively provides the register for yourselves to actually use and actually follow as well. It actually provides equally the areas that, that the line manager needs to complete and what the status of it is. What we have also set up as part of that and recommended is that your employee must give your agency evidence of the illness, and if you do ask for it as well too, which we suggest that you do, a doctor's certificate for it as well, if that is the case. Now, with it, the reason that we ask for that is also when they return back to work as well too, after that 2-week period, they obviously need to get a clearance in order to do so. And that's really from a work health and safety point of view. Again, a number of agencies have started to look at using this form, which is a COVID-19 self-assessment form, in order to document and load in the evidence around that. Now, one of the things that people do ask us is, how do we know that the staff member is actually at home? Look, we do need to monitor them. We do need to support them around that as well. And so with it, what you can do with the staff member's permission, and this is part of the supporting staff as well, effectively you can, once you have their address and load their details in, and I'll do it for myself here, we've loaded even our staff information in. and even where I'm working from in the office at Eltham today. So with it, what you can actually do, allow this, is to effectively auto monitor and surveillance in order to support your staff. And effectively what it will do is actually drill down to exactly where the staff members are self-isolating as well too. And you can see my little asterisk, which appears on my map for our system. And yes, we do use, our law firm does use the Gemma 360 platform as well. And part of that is to actually ensure that our staff can be supported. The reason for this is that from this dashboard here, especially from a monitoring and surveillance point of view, we can actually see hotspots around this, and if there are issues that we need to inform our staff about, then we can support them as well. Part of the work health and safety part is that if a staff member is self-isolating, but there is effectively a hotspot in the local supermarket or the like, the last thing that really you want to happen is that they're self-isolating into a specific hotspot that actually, or a region that has its own outbreak in its local area. So effectively what we can do from here as part of this is to actually identify where the local hotspots are. And this really supports your staff in where and what they need to actually do. So the next question moving through is, what if an employee is stuck overseas and now actually, as of the last few days, interstate or required to be quarantined? Well, quite simply, the Commonwealth has instructed at this stage people to not travel unless it is necessary to do so. And for that sake, we are directing agencies to have travel restriction policies, especially as school holidays are actually coming up, and to limit travel interstate at the very least, and also even in their local area as well too. It is the case that employees should contact your agency immediately if they are unable to attend work because they either, in this case it doesn't apply, return from overseas because 90% of the planes are grounded, but more importantly now interstate travel is also being limited as well too. So there really is an obligation, a legal obligation on your staff to immediately notify your agency if they are unable to return to work and they are required to be quarantined or self-isolate. Now, in this case, the Fair Work Act does not have specific rules for these kinds of situations for employers and employees. So there is a need for your agency in some ways to come up with your own arrangement. And this may include that the staff take sick leave if the employee is in fact sick, or taking annual leave as well. I will add on this that one other question that sort of turns on this is, what if an employee falls sick at work? And we'll actually come to this as opposed to falling sick outside work. So we will come to that particular question a bit later on. Taking any other leave available to them, such as long service leave or any other leave under award or contract or enterprise agreement, again, will be an arrangement that your agency needs to come with directly. We actually suggest that you actually, and we have actually changed HR leave policy documents in order to actually support this temporary measure for your agency. And this actually comes back to who's actually going to pay for this at the end of the day as well too. If the people don't have any sick leave left or they don't have annual leave left, it is up to there is some degree of arrangements between yourselves and the employee on whether it is paid as part of the agency's ability to do so, or quite simply, if the agency is not in a financial position to be able to do that and carry that debt as well too, then other arrangements will need to be obviously made. The other variation on that is, what if your agency wants your staff to actually stay at home? So this is not this is not the staff member wanting to actually do it. It's actually a direction coming from yourself. And you may want to do this for a number of reasons. One obvious one is that there has been a suspected case of the coronavirus at work. Under that, firstly, there is work health and safety laws that your agencies need to follow in this case. And you need to take those reasonable steps to make sure that if an employee is at risk of infection, then they do go and get medical clearance from their doctor or fever clinic, obviously, and not work during the risk period. We have had a number of agencies contact us about this and say, look, we think a staff member has had contact, not with their, or close contact, not with their immediate friends or family, but by a second degree person, meaning that their family member has had contact with a person that might have it. So it's a 2 degree of separation away. Now, on that basis, it is around close contact and how much contact did that person have, which is why we've told people, look, you need to actually have staff complete the self-assessment form, which is on your system, because what this will actually do is give you the tools to actually identify, well, how is the department actually making the assessment? If they answer no to this, then you probably wouldn't actually take the steps to actually do it. Whereas if they do answer yes around this and provide some degree of concern, especially under this question here, then obviously you would need to self-isolate and asked them to be tested. The reason being is that at this stage, we're not seeing with the pandemic curve that the Commonwealth keep on talking about, we haven't seen that curve flatten. So the decisions that we are making at this stage is not the decisions that I expect to have in place 2, maybe 3 months down the track. So it is something that you need to consider, actually, that this is some of these HR decisions will actually change over time. Equally, under the Fair Work Act, an employee can be stood down without pay if they can't do useful work. Part of that is around equipment breakdown and obviously industrial action or stoppage of work for which your agency can't be held. So in this case, there may well be an option that you can stand an employee down without pay. And again, it is under specific pandemic legislation that you could make that decision. Equally, one of the things that you will need to carefully consider is that you need to balance your legal obligations, including discriminating against certain parts of the workforce, and also because of people's ethnic origins or cultural diversity, identify people because of that, which some unfortunate agencies have done over the past month or so. Now, one of the other questions that we do see, which is, do all staff work from home? And I'll be honest, as part of that directive or direct as possible, no. This depends on the role and the availability of your agency's reasonable resources. So quite a direct response is that there may well be some staff that simply your agency does not have the capacity for them to work from home. Any work that they can do needs systems, needs documents, needs resources that are only based in the office. And quite simply, we are recommending that agencies actually look through their entire HR profile and look at your services and what is your essential services for your agency. And that will actually decide on who actually works from home and who you may choose to not give the option to. The other part is, do I need to do an assessment of the person's home office? And this really came out of a work health and safety question. Usually in your office, there is a requirement that people do desk audits work health and safety checks, you know, the ergonomics of chairs and desks and postures. So one of the reasonable questions is, do you actually need to do an assessment of the person's home office? And the next question that you'll see is, what happens if somebody gets injured at home as well? Well, what we have suggested is what you should be having is a work from home agreement. As I mentioned, this is something that we can supply directly to yourselves. Let me just bring that up. Here it is here. We've also got it on the GEMBA dashboard, and it's a template document that your agency can use. So part of this is that it actually provides the details. It provides the information on how long the staff member is going to be working from home. This is not necessarily a permanent action that needs to be done, and also gives you the full checklist that your agency can use as well around it. We have this, as I mentioned, also located on the GEMBA platform here, and that way you can actually have your work from home register and also the self-assessment tool there as well. And it just makes it a real simple way to actually do it. Now, obviously, as part of this, what if a staff member has an injury at home? Is this covered by your agency insurance? This is not as far-fetched as you think. In some cases, which you would have seen for those of you that attended work health and safety training last year as well too in our webinars, there have been cases where persons driving from home to work and was injured was actually covered under TAC, and when they had an accident because it was found to be a work-related task. We have actually looked to manage this because this will depend on your insurance coverage, and many of you have different insurance coverages as well too. We have limited this under the agreement document as well too. So this is where, given the situation and the urgency that working from home arrangements may need to be put in place and self-quarantine, etc., again, there is some responsibility now placed on the staff member, and that way you've got a template ready to go to actually use that as well. Who pays for this is the other question that agencies have asked, and do I have to do this all at once? So that being, you know, if a staff member wants to work from home, is it up to the agency to buy all the equipment and fit that person's home office out? Short answer again is no. We're suggesting you build up your agency's resources. Actually, have a look at who and how many people and what is your core services that you actually need to have. Look at how long this period is going to be. You know, it's really just a scalable type of process as well. We have suggested that you make careful decisions that don't do too much at once as well, and update your pandemic policies around this, especially around costings as well. But this is really a temporary solution that you may have. And again, this is covered within this work from home agreement that we've got for you as well. The other one was, can I set work expectations if they're at home, and how can I monitor staff productivity as well too? And I think one of the questions where this came up, and I just, excuse me for laughing around this, but there have been certain situations over the past few weeks where people have decided to work from home, and then on top of that, equally go and get a GP doctor's certificate to say they're also working from home, but they're also now on sick leave. They've got sick, nothing to do with the coronavirus whatsoever, but it's just the usual, you know, headaches and generally feeling unwell as part of a doctor's certificate. I can, with that, just talking quite openly with the group, we've all seen these types of doctor's certificate where it just doesn't smell quite right, but no one is ever going to actually kind of say it out loud. I call it out as it sometimes is when I deliver these sessions, because all of HR managers, CEOs and managers and line managers have seen this, where you know that some of the doctor's certificates that you have seen just a bit suspicious and on the nose. So part of that is, one of the questions is, can I actually set expectations if staff are at home? And obviously, how can I actually monitor that? The short answer is yes, you can. You do have, as part of this, the ability to actually set KPIs under your Gemba system. And if we quite simply jump into here, we've set up a few people that you can actually see. And under this, you can actually set specific tasks that you need people to actually action. You can set specific projects that you need people to do. And if I click into these ones here, you can actually set specific activities that you want people to actually complete and when they need to complete it. Equally, under your platform, you are able to directly video conference with people, check in with them, use your teams as well too around that, but actually completely share screens and, as I said, video conference directly in to speak to people like literally they're sitting face to face in the office. And you can share documents. So you can actually set all of these particular activities. And as many of you have seen, you can actually even time track staff around how long it's actually taken them to do a task. So some agencies have actually even set these things up where you can actually say, okay, look, as part of this, I'm going to set a performance plan around this. We need you to complete, a new write-up of a policy or a review of a document, or make a number of calls to people, etc. Things that you would expect them to do in the office. And you can actually not only track to see what they've actually done, what their milestones are under the project and performance reviews, but also under this table here, actually see how long they've taken to do something. And I will say that our law firm has actually used this and continues to use this actually. So if I need to find out how long staff have actually taken to make a call to a client, and a 5-minute call, if they're taking an hour and a half to actually do it, we can actually go back and see why it's taken them so long to actually do it. And then there are comments and information in that you can also track. So it is something that you can certainly set work expectations. The coronavirus and pandemic doesn't mean that work performance goes out the window and it's work from home and you've got no control over what staff do during that time as well too. But it is certainly an availability to very effectively monitor staff performance. And we suggest that as part of the agreement that you do set up certain KPIs. Just remember that this is not something that is ongoing as part of that. I know some agencies do have outreach workers and have already these systems and use these platforms that I'm showing you already in place. But for most agencies, this is a temporary measure until we get through this public health emergency crisis. So just to finish off, what I'd say to you is review your HR systems around that. Identify key personnel, staff, and include volunteers and contractors as part of that process as well. A lot of what I have spoken to you about does apply similarly to volunteers and contractors as well. Same thing should also be looked at for a working from home policy and an agreement. We have, as I mentioned, this document that is available to your agency. You just need to let us know and we can organize that for you. It does also give you very clearly the checklist that staff need to complete as well too. And this will help you meet your work health and safety obligations as well, and also indemnity coverage too. It'll give you the set dates and contact information as well. And you can then also, which many of you have started to use, is under your dashboard, clicking on this red button, takes you into the ability to manage your staff performance activities and milestones of what they need to do, and also from a public health point of view as well too. You can also ensure that they're also safe where they actually are as well. And so with it, it provides your ability with their permission to effectively ensure that where they are based and located during their self-isolation is not a honeypot, what I call a honeypot for other quarantine cases that actually put them at greater risk than them just simply self-quarantine on their own. Equally, I'd say have clear expectations around this and build your agency's capability to ramp up and also eventually ramp down these disaster systems and HR systems as well too. If you do have any questions, by all means, contact us. Many of you have contacted me directly around many of these questions that I have spoken about. We will be sending these out as well too as questions come up and frequently asked questions. Those resources I know have been incredibly useful from what feedback we have received. We will open up the phone lines and more than happy to stay on the line and answer any questions that you might have. By all means, if you do have any questions outside this webinar, please contact us on 1300 360 360, or you can email us at support@gemba360.com.